My father sabotaged every job I ever got so I would have no choice, but an arranged marriage he didn't know. Grandma left me a stake in a $75 million company. My name is Elise Hargrove. I am 29 years old. I have a finance degree from the University of Connecticut, magna cum laude. And for the past 6 years, I haven't been able to hold a job for longer than a few months. For a long time, I thought it was me. I thought I was the problem. 3 weeks ago, I found out the truth. My father, Victor Hargrove, owner of Hargrove Development Group, had been quietly poisoning my career. Not every time, but enough. A call here, a word to the right person there, always the same story, that I stole from my family. But that is not even what broke me. What broke me was one night at my parents' house, overhearing pieces of a conversation I was never supposed to hear. I didn't catch all of it, but I caught enough. Something about me not finding another job, and him having taken care of it. And then, clear as glass, my father's voice, "She will not have any other options." He was talking about me, and he was smiling when he said it. He was right about one thing. I didn't have many options, but I had one. And it had been sitting in a fireproof lockbox for 15 years, sealed with red wax, left there by the only person in my family who ever saw me clearly. If you have ever been made to feel like you are crazy for failing at things you should be succeeding at, stay with me. This story might change how you see everything. Before I get into what happened, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story resonates with you. Drop a comment telling me where you are watching from and what time it is there. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. I was 10. The first time I understood I was invisible in my own family. I had won the regional math competition first place, out of over 200 students. When I ran to find my parents in the audience, their seats were empty. My father had taken my younger brother Cameron to a junior golf clinic in Glastonbury. Same afternoon. He knew about both events. He chose golf. When I brought the trophy home, a small brass compass mounted on a walnut base, I set it on the kitchen table and waited for someone to ask. My father glanced at it while pouring his coffee the next morning. "Cameron's building relationships out there," he said. Not even looking at me. "You are just doing homework for a trophy." That brass compass sat on my desk for 19 years. No one in my family has ever mentioned it, not once, not at Thanksgiving, not on birthdays, not ever. It is a small thing, but small things add up when you are a kid trying to figure out whether you matter. My grandmother Margaret noticed, though. She was at the competition. She drove 45 minutes to watch me solve equations in front of a panel of judges. Afterward, she took me to a diner and bought me a milkshake and said, "Your father is a fool, Elise. But you are not. Remember that." I was 10. I didn't know what she meant. I do now. At 16, I got accepted into a summer finance program at Yale. Full scholarship. 40 students selected from the entire Northeast. I needed one thing. My father's signature on the permission form. He refused. "You will work at the company this summer," he said. "That is more valuable than any classroom." I spent 10 weeks filing documents at Hargrove Development. No pay, no title. Just filing. Meanwhile, Cameron spent the same summer at a $6,000 golf camp in Scottsdale, Arizona. Victor paid every penny. When I asked why Cameron's camp was valuable, but Yale wasn't, my mother put her hand on my arm and said, "Don't start, Elise, don't start," as if wanting equal investment was starting something. At 23, I graduated magna cum laude. I had a job offer, junior analyst at a firm in Stamford. Starting salary, $62,000, benefits, a real future. My father told me to turn it down. "After everything I have done for you," he said, "you owe this family. You will work here, executive assistant. No salary, no title, just proximity to his control." I said no. That was the first time I ever refused Victor Hargrove. I should have known there would be a cost. Here is what I didn't know then. That same month, my father started making calls. Not to every employer, he was smarter than that. He didn't call 23 companies like some kind of obsessive stalker. That would have been obvious. Instead, he targeted the ones that mattered. Key hiring managers at firms where he had connections. People in Hartford's business community who would take a call from Victor Hargrove seriously. Sometimes, he called directly. Other times, he would mention it casually at a lunch or a golf game, by the way. If my daughter applies to your firm, you should know she has some issues with integrity. A word here, a seed planted there. That is all it takes in a mid-sized city where everyone knows everyone, and the story was always the same. During my senior year, I had used the family credit card to pay for textbooks and a CFA exam preparation course, $1,200 total. He had told me to use the card for school expenses. It was a school expense, but Victor reframed it as theft. His own daughter stealing from the family, $1,200 less than what he spent on Cameron's golf clubs that same year, and he turned it into a weapon he used for 6 years. The Stanford offer rescinded 2 weeks after I accepted. We received some concerning information. First, domino. Over the next 6 years, I applied to more than 20 positions. I got several solid offers. Some were rescinded before I started. Others, I was let go within a few months. Vague language every time. Concerns, not the right fit after all. I didn't know for certain that every single failure was his doing. Honestly, I still don't. Some of those jobs might have fallen through on their own. But enough of them, enough of the timing, enough of the identical language from HR, that when I finally learned the truth, the pattern was undeniable. I started believing something was fundamentally wrong with me. That magna cum laude didn't matter, because something about me was broken in a way I couldn't fix. I kept a spreadsheet. Every application, every offer, every rejection, dates, companies, timelines. I didn't know why I was keeping it. The finance brain in me just said, keep the receipts. Eventually, I took a job as a bookkeeper at a small bakery in West Hartford. $17 an hour. Cash register, inventory, deposit runs. The owner, Mrs. Chen, hired me because her nephew went to UConn, and she trusted the degree. She never called my references. That is the only reason I still had a job, $26,000 a year. That is what a magna cum laude graduate was earning, while her brother drove a BMW, lived in a condo their father bought, and pulled $95,000 at Hargrove Development. There were nights I sat in my apartment and whispered the things my father had been saying about me my whole life. Difficult, ungrateful. Not enough. I didn't know he was the reason I kept falling. I thought I was the reason. That is the cruelest part. He didn't just sabotage my career. He sabotaged my belief in myself. The spreadsheet grew longer. I didn't know it yet, but it would become the most important document I had ever made. Let me lay out the math, because the math tells you everything. Over 6 years, based on the positions I was offered and lost, I forfeited roughly $300,000 in salary. That is conservative. That doesn't count benefits, retirement contributions, or the compounding effect of 6 years of career growth I will never get back. Instead, I was making $26,000. I had $41,000 in student loans barely being serviced, minimum payments. Interest growing. I was living in a studio apartment with a radiator that only worked on one side. I drove a 2011 Honda Civic with over 160,000 miles. Meanwhile, Cameron had a 2-bedroom condo on Farmington Avenue that Victor purchased outright. BMW, $95,000 a year. Same parents, same last name, different life. But the financial damage wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what it did inside my head. I had broken up with my boyfriend of 2 years, Ethan, because I couldn't explain why I kept getting fired. The shame was corrosive. How do you tell someone you love that you have lost multiple jobs and don't know why? How do you sit across from someone at dinner and pretend everything's fine when you got let go that morning? And the HR manager wouldn't even look at you. Ethan didn't leave me. I pushed him away because I believed I was the problem. I told him I needed space. What I meant was, I am too ashamed to let you see what I have become. He sent me a text 3 months after we broke up. I just want you to know I still think you are brilliant. I hope you figure out what is going on. I am rooting for you. I read that text so many times the screen cracked from my grip. He was rooting for me, and I had thrown him away because my father had convinced me without ever saying it directly that I didn't deserve someone rooting for me. My college friendships had faded into a wall of LinkedIn updates I couldn't match. Everyone I graduated with was a VP or a director. I was counting register receipts. Every notification congratulate Sarah on her new role felt like a paper cut. I stopped checking LinkedIn. Some weeks, I stopped going online at all. The isolation was complete, and looking back, that is exactly what Victor wanted. A woman with no network is a woman with no escape. And then, my father started doing something new. He had been having dinners with a man named Gerald Whitmore, a commercial real estate developer, with a company twice the size of Hargrove Development. Gerald had a son, Kyle Whitmore, 33, recently divorced. My father started dropping hints, like grenades. Gerald's son is very successful. Elise. You should meet him. He could take care of you. Take care of me, like I was something to be managed. Like 29 years of my life could be wrapped up neatly in someone else's last name. I watched how my father looked at Gerald at those dinners. Not like a friend, like an opportunity. And the way he looked at me when Kyle's name came up, that was inventory appraisal. The comments got more frequent. More pointed. More like instructions than suggestions. At one family dinner, he seated me next to Kyle without asking. Kyle was polite, handsome. Even he talked about his real estate portfolio and his gym routine, and his ex-wife's unreasonable expectations. I nodded in the right places and ate my salmon, and felt like a product being demonstrated to a buyer. After dinner, my father pulled me aside and said, "Kyle liked you. Don't mess this up, don't mess this up." 5 words that told me everything. I wasn't being introduced to a nice man my father thought I might like. I was being positioned. The way you position a property in a listing, highlight the good angles, minimize the flaws, close the deal. I was 29, magna cum laude, working for $17 an hour, and my father was trying to arrange my marriage like a business deal. But I still didn't know the full picture, not yet. What I overheard in that hallway would change everything. It was a weeknight. Late. I had driven to my parents' house to pick up a box of my grandmother Margaret's belongings. I had been asking about it for months, old photos, some jewelry, whatever was left. My mother finally texted, "Box is on the hallway table, doors unlocked." I let myself in quietly. I didn't want a conversation, I just wanted the box and to leave. That is when I heard voices from the kitchen. Not clearly, the hallway muffled most of it. But I caught fragments. My father's voice, low and confident. Something about Gerald being ready to move forward. Something about Kyle. My mother saying a word that might have been stubborn. Then my father's voice came through. Clearer, the way sound travels when someone raises their pitch just slightly. "She will not find another job. I have taken care of that." A pause. Something I couldn't make out from my mother. And then, "She will not have any other options." I didn't hear the full conversation. I don't know exactly what came before or after. But I heard enough. I heard the shape of it, and the shape was this. My father had been deliberately destroying my ability to work so that I would become desperate enough to marry a man I would never met, to seal a business deal. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. I didn't storm into the kitchen. I picked up the box from the hallway table. I walked out the front door. I closed it quietly. I sat in my car for a long time without starting the engine. I don't know how long. Could have been 20 minutes. Could have been an hour. Time does something strange when the story you have been telling yourself for 6 years. I am the problem. I am not good enough. Something's wrong with me cracks open and a completely different story comes flooding in. Something shifted that night. Not anger, not the loud kind. Clarity. The kind that comes when your eyes adjust in a dark room and you realize the shapes you have been bumping into for years were never random. They were placed there. On purpose. By someone who knew exactly where you would walk. Every rescinded offer. Every vague HR call. Every parking lot where I sat gripping the steering wheel. Wondering what was fundamentally wrong with me. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't me. At least not most of it. It was a campaign. And the worst part, the part that still wakes me up at 3 in the morning, is that I didn't know what he said to every employer. I cannot be certain every single job loss was his doing. Some might have been legitimate, some might have been bad timing, bad chemistry, bad luck. But the ones I can trace, the ones with confirmed phone calls, those are enough. And the uncertainty itself is a kind of cruelty. He didn't just take my career, he took my ability to trust my own experience. Every failure now has a question mark attached to it. Was that real, or was that him? He wasn't punishing me for saying no 6 years ago. He was engineering my surrender. I drove home. It was past midnight when I set the box on my kitchen table and opened it. Inside, old photographs of my grandmother. A pearl brooch I remembered her wearing to church. A handwritten recipe card for her lemon pound cake. And at the bottom, a small leather address book with a sticky note. The note was in my grandmother's handwriting. I recognized the slant. The curled E's, David Park, Esquire. Call him when you are ready, sweetheart. I didn't recognize the name, but something tightened in my chest. I opened my phone, searched David Park, Attorney, Connecticut. First result, David Park, Estate and Trust Law, Middletown, Connecticut. I clicked through to his firm's website under Current Matters, Margaret Hargrove Trust, beneficiary contact pending. My hands were shaking, not from fear. From 15 years of not knowing. I called David Park's office first thing the next morning. I need to take you back 15 years. Because what happened next doesn't make sense without this. I was 14. My grandmother Margaret was 73, and already dying pancreatic cancer. She knew exactly how much time she had, and she spent it like a woman settling accounts. One afternoon, she called me to her sun porch. Late September light. 2 glasses of lemonade. She was sitting in her favorite chair with a manila envelope in her lap. Thick, sealed with red wax. Elise, sweetheart, she said. Her grip on my wrist was firmer than you would expect from a woman that thin. Keep this envelope somewhere safe. Don't open it until you truly need it. And when you do, don't let anyone tell you what you are worth. Not even your father. Especially your father. She didn't say that, but I heard it. I bought a fireproof lockbox with my babysitting money. I put the envelope inside. I moved it with me to every apartment, and there were many. That lockbox came first, before the dishes, before the clothes. Before anything, I never opened it. Every time things got bad, I would look at it and think, not yet. It can get worse. I can handle more. Grandma said I would know when. Here is what I didn't know, and what my father certainly didn't know. Margaret Hargrove wasn't just a sentimental grandmother with an envelope. She was a self-made businesswoman who had been friends with Thomas Mercer since 1978. Thomas Mercer, founder of Mercer Holdings, one of the most respected private holding companies on the East Coast. My grandmother was one of his first investors. She put in $200,000 for founding equity, held in a trust. For me now, I should explain something about that number, because it matters. $200,000 in the early 2000s, invested in a company that grew into a $75 million enterprise that is a significant return, even after dilution from later funding rounds. My grandmother wasn't gambling. She had known Thomas Mercer for over 20 years by then. She had watched him build things, she trusted his character and his competence, and she invested accordingly. It was the most deliberate financial decision she ever made. And she made it not for herself. She knew she wouldn't live to see the return. But for me. She set up the trust so that Victor couldn't touch it. Different lawyer, different bank. His name appears nowhere in the documentation. She did this because she knew her son. She loved him, she was his mother, but she knew what he was capable of, and she planned around it. Now here is the irony that makes this story what it is. My father had spent 10 years trying to get a meeting with Thomas's son, James Mercer. Calls, emails, golf invitations, 10 years of courtship. James kept politely declining, and my father never once asked himself why. He never investigated his own mother's estate, because he assumed Margaret was sentimental, not strategic. He told the family there was nothing significant. He was wrong, and his arrogance, his certainty that his mother couldn't possibly have outsmarted him, would cost him everything. I didn't open the envelope that night. But the next morning, David Park would tell me what was inside. I called David Park's office first thing Friday morning. He answered on the second ring. There was a pause, the kind that carries weight. Elise Hargrove. I have been trying to reach you for 2 years. 2 years. He would send letters, left voicemails, contacted the family. Every attempt had been blocked, rerouted, or ignored. Your father contacted my office multiple times over those 2 years, David said. His voice was measured, professional, but I could hear something underneath it. Not to help us find you, to make sure we couldn't. He explained, Margaret had set up a trust in 2006, the year I turned 9. An investment in Mercer Holdings at founding. I was the sole beneficiary, eligible at 27. I was 29. I had been eligible for 2 years. Mercer Holdings was last valued at approximately $75 million, David said. Your grandmother's stake after dilution from later funding rounds is currently worth somewhere in the range of $2 to $3 million. But I need to be transparent. There are tax implications, legal fees, and the trust activation itself requires filings that could take several months. It wasn't $6 million. It wasn't instant wealth, but it was enough to change my life completely, and more than that. It was proof. Proof that someone in my family had believed in me decades before I stopped believing in myself. I put the phone down. I looked at the sealed envelope on my kitchen table. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands, and I broke the wax. Inside, a handwritten letter from my grandmother, 3 pages of her neat, slanting script, trust documents, and a photograph Margaret and Thomas Mercer, 1978. Standing in front of a half-built office building, both of them smiling. Most of the letter I will keep private. But one line I need to share. Your father will try to take this from you. He cannot. I made sure of it. You are not his to control. You never were, she knew. 20 years ago, she knew what he was. Over the next week, I built my case, but I want to be honest. It wasn't clean. It wasn't a perfect file folder tied with a bow. My friend Marcus, the one person from college who never stopped checking in, helped me go through the spreadsheet. We tried to match my job losses to any evidence of outside interference. Some of it lined up clearly. 3 former managers were willing to confirm on record that they received calls from a man claiming to be a family member, warning them about theft. But other instances were murky. A couple of managers had moved on and couldn't be reached. Some didn't remember specifics. The pattern was strong. Maybe 70 or 80% of my losses had a suspicious phone call attached, but it wasn't airtight. Marcus looked at the spreadsheet and said, Elise, this isn't bad luck. This is a campaign. But we need more. I would actually consulted a lawyer once before 2 years earlier, when I was fired from my 4th job. The attorney had been sympathetic but blunt. Tortious interference is real, but proving it requires showing intent and direct causation. Without recordings or written admissions, it is an uphill battle. And even if you win, the legal costs could eat whatever damages you are awarded. I didn't have the money to pursue it. I barely had the money to pay rent. So I let it go and told myself maybe it really was just bad luck. Now, with David Park's records showing 14 contact attempts from Victor to his office, and 3 managers willing to go on record, the case was different. Not airtight, I want to be clear about that, but different enough that the threat of litigation carried weight. David told me about a dinner my father was hosting the following week, a private event to pitch Gerald Whitmore and James Mercer on a 3-way development deal. The biggest night of Victor's career. David contacted James Mercer's office. The response came within a day. Mr. Mercer would like to meet Miss Hargrove. The plan wasn't to publicly humiliate my father in front of a crowd. That is movie logic. In real life, that gets you sued. Instead, the plan was this. I would meet with James Mercer privately, before the dinner. I would present my documentation, and James Mercer would decide, as a businessman, whether he wanted to partner with a man who had been systematically destroying his own daughter's career. Marcus asked if I was sure. This is your family, Elise. No, I said. Family doesn't do this. This is a man who destroyed my career to sell me into a marriage. He is not my family. He is my warden. What do you want out of this? I thought about it. Really thought. I want to stop being afraid. I want him to know that I know, and I want to walk away on my own terms. The meeting with James Mercer happened 2 days before my father's dinner. A conference room at Mercer Holdings' office in downtown Hartford. Just 4 people, me, David Park, James Mercer, and Mercer's general counsel. I wore a simple black dress, my grandmother's pearl brooch pinned to my collar. James Mercer was taller than I expected. Silver-haired, calm in the way that only people with real authority are calm, not performed, not forced. He shook my hand and held it for a moment. "My father mentioned you before he passed," he said. "He told me Margaret Hargrove's granddaughter would show up one day. He said I should pay attention when she did." I sat down. I laid out what I had, the trust documents, the spreadsheet 20-plus applications, the pattern of sabotage, the confirmed calls from 3 managers. David Park's records, showing Victor had contacted his office repeatedly to block communication with me. The timeline that showed everything escalating after I refused to work for free at Hargrove Development. I was honest about the gaps. "I cannot prove every job loss was his doing," I said. "Some of it is circumstantial. Some managers have moved on and cannot be reached. But the pattern is consistent, and the 3 direct confirmations are enough to establish what he was doing and why." I told him about the arranged marriage, about Gerald Whitmore's son, about what I overheard in the hallway. I watched James Mercer's face change, not dramatically, not in the way people's faces change in movies, just a tightening around the eyes. The look of a man who runs a $75 million company, hearing something that confirms a suspicion he has had for a very long time. "I am not here to ask you to punish my father," I said. "I am here because you should know who you are considering doing business with. What you do with that information is your decision." James Mercer listened without interrupting. His counsel took notes. When I finished, the room was quiet for a moment. "Miss Hargrove," James said, "I have been declining your father's partnership proposals for years. Not because the deals were bad, some of them were reasonable, but because my father told me something before he died. Don't do business with Victor Hargrove until you have met his daughter." I never fully understood what he meant. I think I do now. He looked at his counsel, then back at me. "This partnership dinner Saturday night. I am going to decline the proposal. I will not air your personal situation in public, that is your business, not mine. But I will make it clear that Mercer Holdings has chosen a different direction." I nodded. "There is one more thing," he said. "Your grandmother's trust is legitimate. You are a stakeholder in this company. When you are ready, I would like you to attend a shareholder meeting. Not as a favor, because you belong there." I thanked him. I picked up my documents. I walked out of the building and sat on a bench outside for 15 minutes, watching traffic, feeling something I hadn't felt in 6 years. That I wasn't crazy, that the evidence was real, that someone believed me. The dinner happened that Saturday. I wasn't there, I didn't need to be. I spent that evening at my apartment with Marcus. We ordered Thai food. He asked if I wanted to talk about it. I said no. We watched a documentary about coral reefs. I don't remember a single thing about it, but I remember the sound of the narrator's voice, and the feeling of being in a room with someone who didn't need me to perform being okay. From what I pieced together afterward from Marcus, from Ruth Abernathy, from industry contacts who reached out in the weeks that followed, this is what happened. My father gave his pitch. New suit, rehearsed speech, the full Victor Hargrove performance. Charts, projections, a 10-year partnership vision with revenue forecasts that he probably believed were destiny. James Mercer listened politely. When my father finished, James stood and said he appreciated the presentation, but Mercer Holdings would be pursuing a different strategic direction at this time. He didn't mention me, he didn't mention the trust, he didn't offer an explanation. He simply declined, and in the business world, a decline without explanation is louder than any accusation. Gerald Whitmore, reading the room with the instinct of a man who has survived 40 years in real estate, by knowing when to exit, followed Mercer's lead. "I think I need to revisit timing on this as well. Victor, let's reconnect down the road. The kind of "Let's reconnect" that everyone in the room understood meant never. My father stood at the head of the table and watched the biggest deal of his career walk out the door. He didn't know why, not that night. But the phone calls started the following week. Industry people asking careful questions. Associates who had been at the dinner mentioning it to other associates. The way information moves in a mid-sized city's business community. Not in headlines but in lowered voices, at coffee shops and raised eyebrows at board meetings. "Did you hear about Victor Hargrove's dinner?" Mercer walked out. So did Whitmore. "Something's going on." Victor called James Mercer's office 3 times that week. Each time, the same response. "Mr. Mercer is unavailable." By the third call, even Victor understood what unavailable meant. The truth didn't come out in a single dramatic moment. It leaked. The way real consequences work, not like a bomb, but like water finding every crack in a foundation you thought was solid. What I did was quieter than a movie scene. I sent my father one letter, through David Park, certified mail. It said, "I know about the phone calls. I know about the arranged marriage. I know about the trust you tried to hide. I have documentation. If you contact any employer, financial institution, or legal representative connected to me again, everything goes to a courtroom. There are no second chances. I didn't sign it, your daughter. I signed it with my full name, Elise Hargrove." The responses came in like clockwork. Victor called David Park's office the same day the letter arrived. Demanded to speak with me. David declined. Then he called me directly. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was hoarse, the cadence of a man who hadn't slept. "Elise, we need to talk. You are blowing this out of proportion over some old paperwork your grandmother left." Old paperwork, a trust worth millions, a 20-year investment, and a grandmother's last act of love. And he called it old paperwork. I did not respond. My mother texted that evening. "Your father is very upset. You should come home and work this out. Family handles things privately." I typed back, "Family doesn't sabotage their daughter's career and try to arrange her marriage. That is not fair, Elise." I stared at those 3 words. 3 words that captured 30 years of my mother's philosophy. Fairness was something she invoked when I defended myself, but never when I was attacked. It only mattered when it pointed toward Victor's comfort. "I know," I wrote. None of it was. Cameron called, not texted. Called 2 days later. His voice was defensive. Not angry exactly, but cornered. "Dad says you hired a lawyer and you are threatening the family. Is that true? Ask him what he has been doing to me for 6 years. Then decide who is threatening whom. Elise, you are overreacting. Dad's tough. But he wouldn't Cameron. He called my employers and told them I was a thief. I have managers who will confirm it. I have the lawyer's records showing he blocked my inheritance for 2 years. This isn't me being dramatic. This is documented." Silence on the other end. "I am not asking you to choose sides," I said. "I am asking you to look at the evidence before you decide I am the problem. That is all." He hung up. He wasn't ready, I understood. When your entire life has been built on a foundation someone else poured, finding out that foundation was mixed with someone else's suffering, that takes time to process. More time than a phone call, more time than a month, maybe more time than a year. I want to be honest about something here. There was a part of me, a small, petty, exhausted part, that wanted to send that letter to every person in Hartford's real estate community, that wanted to post the spreadsheet online, that wanted Victor Hargrove to experience even a fraction of the professional destruction he had inflicted on me for 6 years. I didn't. Not because I am a saint, because I had spent enough of my life letting my father's behavior dictate mine. The letter through David Park was enough. It drew a line. It said, "I know. I have proof. Touch my life again and we go to court." That was sufficient. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. The kind of tired that lives in your bones after carrying something heavy for years, and finally setting it down. You don't celebrate, you just stand there, noticing how light your arms are. But I also felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Clarity, the same clarity I felt in the hallway that night, but deeper now, settled. Not reactive clarity, the kind that comes from shock. This was the kind that comes after you have done something about it. Through David Park, I filed for formal activation of the trust. I was told it would take 3 to 4 months to process tax filings. Legal review, beneficiary verification, nothing instant, nothing cinematic, just paperwork. Moving slowly through a system that doesn't care about your story. I opened a new bank account at a separate institution. Transferred my savings, what little there was. For the first time in my life, my finances existed somewhere my father couldn't see or touch. The fallout didn't happen overnight. It happened the way real consequences happen slowly, and then all at once. The first month, nothing visible changed. Victor still ran Hargrove Development, still showed up to industry events, still shook hands and made deals. From the outside, you wouldn't know anything had shifted, but underneath, the ground was moving. James Mercer's decline of the partnership was the first crack. In Hartford's real estate circles, people noticed. When the biggest holding company in the region says no to you publicly, people ask questions. Nobody had a definitive answer, but rumors began. Something about Victor's daughter, something about a trust, something about phone calls. The specifics were fuzzy, the damage was precise. Gerald Whitmore distanced himself quietly. No dramatic exit line, real businessmen don't do that. He simply stopped returning Victor's calls, rescheduled meetings that never got rescheduled again. The merger discussion died, the way most bad deals die. In silence, one of Hargrove Development's existing clients, a commercial project in East Hartford, requested a full contract review. They didn't terminate immediately, but the review itself was a signal. When your clients start auditing you, trust is already gone. Victor hired a reputation consultant. I don't know exactly what it cost him, but based on what Marcus heard through industry contacts, it wasn't cheap, and it didn't work. You cannot manage a reputation when the people who matter have already made up their minds. The consultant could scrub online mentions and draft press-friendly statements. But she couldn't unsay what James Mercer said when he stood up from that table. And she couldn't unwalk Gerald Whitmore's exit. Those moments live in the memories of everyone who was in the room. And no amount of reputation management can reach inside someone's memory and edit it. Victor tried a different tactic after the first month. He started telling a new story, that I had been manipulated by my grandmother's estate lawyer. That David Park had poisoned me against the family. That the whole situation was the result of a bitter old man exploiting a confused young woman. He said this at a Rotary Club meeting. He said versions of it at 2 industry lunches. Nobody challenged him to his face, that is not how these things work. But nobody believed him either. When your own daughter produces a spreadsheet and 3 witnesses, the she was manipulated defense doesn't land. My mother called me once during those first weeks. She was crying before she finished saying my name. I didn't know the full extent. Elise, you heard pieces of it, Mom. You were sitting in that kitchen. I thought he would stop eventually. I thought it was just, you know how he gets. He called my employers for 6 years. He blocked my inheritance. He was arranging my marriage to close a deal. That is not how he gets. That is who he is. Long pause. I could hear her breathing. I should have done more, she said. Very quietly. Yes, I said, you should have. I didn't hear from her again for months after that. She didn't go see a divorce attorney, that would be too neat, too fast. What she did was smaller, and maybe more honest. She started sleeping in the guest room. She stopped accompanying Victor to industry events. She began existing in the same house, but in a different marriage. Whether she had ever leave, I don't know. That is her decision to make, in her own time. And I have stopped waiting for her to make it. Cameron took the longest. For the first 3 months, he defended our father. Not publicly, he wasn't stupid, but in our rare conversations, I could hear it, the rationalizing. The dad's harsh, but he means well. The inability to see the system clearly, because the system had always worked for him. It was month 4 when something shifted. Cameron had started asking questions at the office carefully, the way you do when you suspect the answer will be ugly. He went through phone records, found call logs from Victor's office line that matched the timing on my spreadsheet. Not all of them, maybe 15 out of my 20-plus applications, but enough. He texted me a photo of the call log. Then, I found some of these. I am sorry, I didn't know. I sat with that for a while. I believe you didn't know. I wrote back, but you benefited, the condo, the car, the salary, all of it existed in a system where I was being dismantled. I need you to sit with that. He didn't respond for 2 weeks. When he did, it wasn't an excuse. Just, I am sitting with it. We have had coffee twice since then. It is awkward and honest and imperfect. He is still at Hargrove Development. I don't know if he will stay. I don't pressure him about it. Leaving isn't simple when your father is your boss and your landlord, and your only frame of reference for how the world works. 6 months out, the trust was finally activated. After taxes, legal fees, and administrative costs, my actual liquid access was lower than the headline number, closer to what I had called life-changing, but not fantasy level. David Park had warned me about this from the beginning. Trust activation isn't like cashing a check. There are capital gains considerations, estate taxes, and the equity itself isn't liquid. You cannot just sell founding shares on a stock exchange. Some of the value was in the form of equity that I had held long-term. The actual cash I could access immediately was enough to transform my daily life, but not enough to retire at 29, which honestly was fine. I didn't want to retire. I wanted to work on my own terms. Without looking over my shoulder, I paid off my $41,000 in student loans in one transaction. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot afterward and laughed until I cried. Then I drove straight to the bakery and gave Mrs. Chen a hug and told her I would be staying on part-time. She looked confused. "You don't need to work here anymore," I said. "I know. That is why I want to." I enrolled in the CFA program, the one I had been putting off for 6 years, the one that started with that $1,200 exam prep course my father weaponized against me. I studied for 3 months and failed level I on my first attempt. I am not going to pretend that didn't sting. It stung a lot. Marcus bought me dinner that night and said, "You know the difference between this failure and every other one? This one was actually yours. That means you can fix it." I passed it 3 months later. I started therapy. First session, I cried for most of the hour. The therapist handed me tissues and said, "That wasn't weakness. That was years of pressure leaving your body. I go every 2 weeks now. It is not a straight line. Some sessions I feel like I have made no progress at all, but I keep going." James Mercer invited me to a shareholder meeting. I went. I sat at the table. I didn't speak much, I listened. When the meeting ended, James pulled me aside. "Your grandmother would have been proud of how you have handled this," he said. "When you are ready for a role here, consulting, advisory, whatever fits, the door is open." I told him not yet. I need to figure out who I am when I am not surviving. He nodded. "That is the most Margaret thing you could have said." Victor sent me a letter 6 months after the dinner. Handwritten, 4 pages. I read it all. The key line: "I did what I thought was best for this family. Not I was wrong. Not I am sorry." 4 pages, and he couldn't write those words. I set the letter down on my kitchen table and made myself dinner. I didn't respond. I am not sure I ever will. Ruth Abernathy, my grandmother's oldest friend, became a fixture in my life. Sunday dinners. She makes Margaret's lemon pound cake from the recipe card that was in the box. She tells me stories about my grandmother I had never heard. One evening, she handed me a sealed envelope, addressed to Victor, in Margaret's handwriting, never sent. "Are you going to open it?" she asked. I put it back in the box. Some envelopes are better left closed. Today, I am sitting in my apartment in West Hartford. 2 bedrooms now. I moved last month. Decent light. A small desk by the window where I study for CFA Level 2. On my desk, 2 brass compasses. One from a math competition when I was 10. One I bought myself at 29. On the wall, a framed photograph of Margaret and Thomas Mercer, 1978. On the kitchen counter, a plate with a slice of lemon pound cake. Ruth came over last night. It is quiet here. Not lonely quiet, Not the silence of a studio apartment where you stare at the ceiling and catalog your failures. This is the kind of quiet that happens when you stop performing for people who were never watching. I am not healed. I want to be honest about that. I still have weeks where the self-doubt comes back, where I hear my father's voice in my head, telling me I am difficult, and I have to actively remind myself that his version of me was a weapon, not a description. I still flinch when my phone rings from an unknown number. I still have a moment of panic every time I submit a job application, even though the cease and desist should have stopped the calls. Some damage doesn't heal on a timeline that makes for a good story. It heals on its own schedule, or it doesn't heal at all, and you learn to carry it differently. Therapy helps. Time helps. Having one person, Ruth or Marcus or Mrs. Chen, who sees you clearly helps more than anything, and the two brass compasses on my desk help too, in their own way. One says, "You are always capable." The other says, "You finally know it." Here is what I have learned. 3 things. First, about control. When someone systematically removes your options, they are not protecting you. They are imprisoning you. And they will call the cage family, so you will not try to leave. If every door in your life keeps closing, stop blaming yourself and start looking at who is holding the handle. Second, about worth. I spent 6 years thinking my failure proved I was broken. It didn't. It proved someone was breaking me on purpose. There is a difference between those two things, and recognizing that difference might save your life. Third, about inheritance. The real kind. My grandmother left me money, but that is not what she really left me. She left me proof that someone in my family saw me clearly, believed in me completely, and planned for my freedom 20 years before I knew I needed it. If you have someone like that, a grandmother, a mentor, a teacher, anyone who looked at you and said, "I see you, hold on to that," it might be the thing that saves you. If you are watching this, and something feels familiar, if you have been told you are too difficult, too sensitive, too much. If you have watched your opportunities disappear, and you cannot figure out why, I need you to hear me. You are not failing. Someone might be failing you. On purpose. Start keeping records. Start asking questions. And if there is someone in your life who ever told you to keep your receipts, to save the documents, to trust yourself, when nothing else makes sense, listen to them. Your worth is not up for negotiation, not by your parents, not by anyone. It never was. My father said I wouldn't have any other options. My grandmother made sure I had only need one. If this story hit you somewhere, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was working against you? How did you find out? I read every single comment. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. I post every week. And hey, take care of yourself. You deserve someone in your corner, starting with you. Thank you for listening. I will see you next time.